The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
When Judas had left them, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and God will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only a little while longer. I give you a new commandment: love one another. As I have loved you, so you also should love one another. This is how all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Nuptial or marriage spirituality is very much part of our biblical scriptures. If you look at the beginning of the book of Genesis, after the creation account, God creates man. But man, even though he has authority over all of creation, he looks at the beauty of nature. He has command over the fish of the seas, the birds in the air, and he names the animals. There's still something missing from his life, and that's a suitable partner. You can only talk to a dog for so long, I suppose. So God creates woman, and if you notice the beautiful poetry, the symbolism in the book of Genesis, creates woman from the rib of man, the closest part of his, closest to the heart. Because a woman really becomes the heart of the home. From his rib, this woman is created. And there's a great longing between the two of them. And if you notice today's reading from the book of Revelation, chapter 21, we're nearing the end, so you get the beginning and the end. You could say it's a bookshelf with two bookends. Huh? And this is what we read in Revelation 21. "I also saw the holy city, a new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband." So that spirituality of bride and bridegroom is very much fixed in the church. The church is often referred to as the bride of Christ. All of us sitting here today are in essence the bride of Christ. Christ is waiting for us. And that fulfillment comes in glory on the last day, when the bridegroom will be accepting the bride. Now I mention that because in the midst of marriage, as you know, there's a lot of work involved. We began the Mass today, priest prays for you, talked about the mystery, the Paschal mystery. Now what's the Paschal mystery? Well, it means the suffering, dying, and rising of Christ, in that order. The suffering, dying, and rising of Christ. So today's gospel, Jesus says this: "I give you a new commandment, love one another, as I have loved you." So the bridegroom loves the bride. He loves the bride with such immensity that he lays down his life for the bride. So Jesus says today, if you're going to love, you've got to follow my example of love. It's not a fluffy love. It's not an easy love. It's not a contrived love, but the love that you have to follow is a love that at times, as Dorothy Day, the great Catholic social activist, once said, taking the book of Dostoevsky, the great Russian author, says, love is a harsh and dreadful thing. In other words, don't think that love is going to tickle you. Love means commitment. It means dying to self if you're going to be authentic. So today's gospel is John 13. And notice what Jesus says. Now is the Son of Man glorified. So how is Christ going to be glorified? Well, the cross. See, there's no easy way out for us. It's the cross. So if we're going to love, if we're going to enter into the Paschal mystery, if we're going to be the bride of Christ, we've got to die to self. So, how do we die to self? Well, let me give you some biblical examples and some practical examples. So Jesus teaches us what love is. What's love for Jesus? Well, woman at the well could have said, you've been married 5 times, now you're living with the 6th man. Shame on you. What does he say? I've got life-giving water for you. It's always an invitation to grow. Matthew, the tax collector. He sees Matthew, who's hated by his fellow Jews. He says, Matthew, my heart's filled with mercy. I want to sit down and eat with you. Doesn't say, you idiots, you're cheating people. It's always an invitation. Zacchaeus, come down from that tree, Zacchaeus. This very day I want to eat with you. It's always an invitation to enter into love. So how do we enter love? Well, Mother Teresa, giving a beautiful story when she was a little girl, says that when her mom one day gave her a big sack of rice to bring to a neighbor, happened to be a Muslim woman who had 8 children. She had been recently widowed. And little Mother Teresa, at the time it wasn't her name, she gets to the house and she gives the woman the bag of rice. Immediately the woman goes to her kitchen, gets another bag, splits it in 2, and says, I'm going to bring this half of rice, this bag of rice, to a friend of mine who has no food. Even though they were starving, she took half of what she had received to give it to someone else. That's love. What's love? When a dad has to go to work every day, sometimes traveling, or a mother traveling long distances to put meat on the table, bread on the table. That's love. And somebody gets up in the middle of the night to care for another person who's ill. Could be a mom or dad caring for a child. That's love. When someone's willing to go the extra mile to help a neighbor in need, that's love. I just noticed recently there was a fire in Stratham, and many people in the town came together, started raising money to help people. That's love. Love isn't anything that, is superfluous to our way of thinking. It comes to us every day. There are opportunities for us to love. And the more you love, the more you build character. Remember, as a kid, my dad was an only child, and he was a car salesman, and many of his cousins, most of them, had moved out of town to find work. And all of their parents, as they grew older, really didn't have anybody close by to care for them. So my dad became really a caregiver for many, many of his aunts and uncles. And I remember, even as a kid, my dad would go to the hospital every day, whether it be early in the morning or late at night, to shave his uncles, or else he'd go feed his aunts who couldn't eat anymore, who were incapacitated for one reason or another. He'd be the one who called his cousins to let them know how their parents were doing, or he'd drive them back and forth to hospitals and doctor's appointments. And I was always impressed by his selflessness and his willingness to be for others. It's love. And you learn, when you see love being given like that, you learn how to love. That's entering the Paschal mystery. That's what it means to die to self. Huh? So the Paschal mystery is suffering. There's always suffering involved when you're going to grow. As an athlete, as a musician, however, in workplace, you've got to suffer. You've got to start from the bottom up. But then, with time, the suffering turns into a death to self. You become more aware of what you've got to do to grow. Dying to self, to your willful ways, and that leads to resurrection. So that's what we await. That's why we as a church await a bridegroom. A bridegroom who says to us, it's worth it. And one day all this pain, all these tears will be wiped away. That's why John says, I, John, saw a new heaven and a new earth. The old order had passed away. It's what we long for. So as we celebrate this Easter season, let's follow the commandment of Jesus to love one another. Never easy, but the more we do it, the more we die to our ways and take up His ways, the more we will glory in the Lord.